said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy...
State of fear. Welcome to Flyover State of Fear. We are back. I am with a very special guest this week, Josh Bragg from Haunting Season. You may have seen him with his lovely TikToks that always bring me joy when they pop up. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here. It's the end of my workday, and I love ending it with conversations about horror movies.
I'm glad you could be here talking at the end of your workday. I know sometimes I don't want to be where I'm at the end of my workday, so I really appreciate it. And you have the coolest set, I think, possible. So tell me a bit about yourself. For those that don't know, you probably have seen him. I mean, I discovered Josh in Haunting Seasons through TikTok, just scrolling and these really interesting videos of you just have a really great way of breaking down and storytelling either a movie you're talking about or one of your own short stories. So just tell me a little about it.
Yeah. So I'm a cinematographer. Actually, my job title now is senior creative director at the company that I work at. We do a lot of documentary stuff. So the reason why my stuff looks the way it does is because I have an obsession with cameras and lenses and lighting. So you can see I do a lot of my own lighting because there's a sense of pride to if I'm going to make content, I might as well do it to the best of my ability. But my story starts way before TikTok. I started creating, well, I was working at this job in 2013, and my buddy, it was like one of these multi-channel networks for YouTube that were really big back in the day. We were competing with Machinima and lost. But we noticed that no one was really doing horror content online. Then creepypasta was just starting to become a thing. And I was like, well, I don't want to tell other people's stories. I'd rather tell my own. And so I had a few ghost stories from high school that we don't know if it was really ghosts or if we were just scaring each other. I mean, we were 19, so you never know. But so I told one of those stories and it kind of took off, and I was like, all right, I'll tell another one. And then after 3 stories, I had no more stories left, so I had to start writing them myself.
That's amazing. Was that Clinton? Was that your Clinton Road story?
Yeah, the Clinton Road was the second of the 3.
Yeah,
or maybe it was the third, but yeah.
For that's just the weird New Jersey. I mean, we just such a treasure trove to pull from of just stuff. Actually, recently, my brother's looking for a new house, and I don't know if you're familiar with 13 Bumps Road. I think it's up in Watchung. It's about the witches that were buried. Well, the house they looked at, it looked haunted. It had been haunted, and it was the oldest house on that street they looked up after. So it's everywhere. But that's really neat, and what you've done to capture the stories on your own. And I've been listening to a few, and the last week or so, especially, you've been kind of my voice at work.
Cool.
So just okay, but that's awesome. I just love what you've built with the channel, and from all different outlets, from your podcast to the YouTube to the TikToks. Right, they're a nice chunk, but you're able to branch off and learn more.
Yeah. So I did that once I ran out of true stories, I started writing stories because I was then addicted to this platform. And I did it every week for 2 years, and then I got super burnt out, and my job was changing, and my life was changing. I ended up moving to California to take this job, and it was years of working my way up in the company. And last year, just before Halloween, we were pitching ideas of because we're all filmmakers, the guys who started this company. how do we get back into just pure entertainment outside of like the medical stuff and the documentary stuff? And I was like, well, I used to do this show. And so we were like, well, why don't we bring it back as a podcast? So that's what I've been doing this whole past year. And TikTok was just something I started messing around with, and it clicked. And
That's
over the
amazing.
course of the year, I'm at like 216,000. I think in February of last year, I had like 12 people following me.
I had
It's been a wild ride.
That is awesome. I had one TikTok. I don't make TikToks very often, and I'll try to put this show more up there. Um, One go where it was just a bad OJ joke, and it went somewhat, a lot of views viral, and then I got a panic attack about that many views in my face right there, and I was like, all right, I need to stop. Um, so that's awesome. But yeah, you are immersed in horror, and like you said, it is really interesting to hear your thoughts, and that's what we're talking about today. And for those I haven't even mentioned it, we're going to be talking about a really I'll say an obscure movie just because it doesn't make lists, and we'll get to it in a little bit. Jack Brooks' Monster Slayer. Um, but what is, as we ask most on the show, what is your horror origin story? And by the way, your short stories, hopefully, I hope to be killed by you one day, and I know that's one of your things. So
Yeah.
maybe, uh, or not. We'll see how the conversation goes. Um, but so what's your origin story? That's kind of where we like to start off on this show. Just what got you, what got you into like horror. It doesn't have to be movies in your case, or movies or horror, or just or it scared you. I don't know. It's your question to answer, I should say.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And my memory is a tricky thing because I have recently found out, like recently, as in the last 2 months, maybe even the last like 4 weeks, have figured out that I have aphantasia and I can't
What's up?
create visuals in my mind. So like when someone reads a book and you kind of see it like a movie in your mind,
Mhm.
I see the words on the page. I don't see anything.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, and I
So
didn't know this my
that's
whole
crazy.
life.
That's like
Yeah.
opposite of what you'd imagine like I'm an artist myself, like an artist and a storyteller is you'd
Yeah.
think, right? Like I think to myself, like, oh, I visualize it. So that's really interesting. So yeah, that
Yeah, so when I pull up like my past, I have the words to describe things, but I don't have this like, deep visual memory of the films that I've watched. And one of the blessings of that is that I can watch films that I love and still be surprised by the ending because I don't remember the visuals. I just
hmm,
remember the feeling of the story. So when I love a film, it's often I have these like deep feelings about a movie, but and I could probably tell you the plot and some of the bigger things that happen. And I could probably even describe visuals to you. I'm a writer, like I said, but I'm not. I don't know. There's like patches
interesting.
missing,
Yeah.
So my horror origin story, I've been kind of tracking it because people have been asking me that a lot since the takeoff on TikTok. You know, jumping on different podcasts and piecing it all together. So I know when I know when I was in it was either middle school or high school when The Ring came out, and I remember going to see that in the movie theater, and that was an unbelievable experience. And I think that's really what hooked me. I think I had seen things that had scary parts in them. I'd always been
Um,
interested in that part of like Disney films when things got scary,
yeah,
but The
same.
Ring was like the
The
switch.
Switch. Yeah, I. So it's so funny you mentioned the ring, and like I said, I think this is 14 or so talking or learning about people and their origin story, or not, because I want to have. It's like my wife is the her. She won't watch horror movies. She won't watch anything, but she wants to be on the show, and the ring is what did it for her to not want ever again. And I said, well, we have to watch the ring if you're going to come on. That's not
Oh
true. She can
yeah.
come on whenever she wants. But um, why my face kind of lit up is I swear everyone from a certain imagine we're within a 10-year age gap or so. I'm turning 30, and but I've talked to people from the mid 20s to probably about 40 on this show so far, and I swear everyone has three or four movies that is like this is why or this what got into me, and The Ring is like a very consistent one. So that's and but it is as a movie, The Ring's phenomenal. It's visually stunning. I mean, Gore Verbinski. It's so I see how it sticks with someone, right? I remember watching The Ring as a kid and being terrified, and like my brother coming home because he saw it in the theaters, and he's 4 years older, and making me shut off all my TVs because I used to bring home CRTVs and
Mhm.
just like put them in my room, and they're probably all staticky. And he turned them all off and was scared. Um, so that's yeah, it's so funny you mentioned The Ring because it's like it's insane how common the like 4 horror movies are that people have.
Yeah, and I think what really stuck with me about The Ring is that it's a detective story for all intents and purposes. It's like the journalist going out and trying to figure out exactly why this thing is happening, and it starts out with this super scary moment. It ends where, you get the climax with this super scary moment, but in between it's just dread, and it's just building anticipation, and they kind of reset the clock a couple of times. It's just brilliantly written and
Yeah,
executed. And I want to guess what the other movies are
yeah.
that pop
Can
up all the
can you?
time, because for me, like, The Thing is another really big one.
Okay,
I feel like that one comes up a lot.
it hasn't. Actually, the Lost Flyover of Fear recording is the thing because we just lost the video and audio, but that has not come up. Because I don't think the thing's as mainstream popular
Yeah,
to
it's
an
not.
extent.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just recently got that beautiful Shout Factory Blu-ray they put out. It looked phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, my dream is to find it on VHS because that's how I originally saw it, and I want that again. I've seen it in the movie theater, I've seen it
mhm.
on VHS, I've seen it on digital. I think VHS is my favorite.
Gotcha. So they have, yeah, that Blu-ray has like 4 versions on it too. It has like the TV edit because it's completely different. I'm sure of it.
Oh
So if
right.
I do find the VHS, if I go like Goodwill or something, and I find it, I collect everything but not VHSs for some reason. I will ship it to you if I do find the thing on VHS.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and
Uh,
I'll pay I'll
yeah,
I don't
don't
know,
worry
I'll pay
about it.
back in favor. No, some kind of return favor. I like bartering.
All
Uh
right. Well, I'll be on the lookout for it. All right. So I'll give you the other 2 other guesses. Like I said, I think they're common enough. Like everyone kind
yeah.
of within that same millennial, elder millennial, Gen Z-ish has the same 3 or 4 movies, at least
All
I
right,
think.
so I'm going to say Scream.
Scream's
Scream.
on there. I've heard someone say Scream.
Mhm.
And it's more, I guess, what scared people.
Scared.
It's like The Ring's there, really terrified, probably hit the same age.
The Grudge
Uh,
is what came right after.
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I'll just give it to you. Um,
Yeah.
it's, uh, weirdly enough, The Shining.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Shining is like it's like that's like right there. Not just a few people, someone I've had on the show, and then weirdly enough, and I kind of someone mentioned it to me, and it kind of triggered a memory of mine was The Birds,
Oh.
which I think is more of like it was on TV and you caught it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So, but the Ring's right up there. The Shining, The Birds, and God, I'm even blanking on the fourth one. So we'll just move on.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, The Shining, I should have gotten The Shining. My wife,
Yes.
I've been getting her to watch horror movies with me, and I got her to go see A Nightmare on Elm Street in the movie theater.
Oh, it's so cool.
She won't rewatch The Shining.
Yeah, The Shining's a rough one. I will. So my like, I feel terrible. I've mentioned before. My wife. Like the first year you kind of date, like you're not. You're willing to go to like movies or something and not be like I'm terrified. Or for the most part, my
Mhm.
wife, I dragged her to Sinister and Evil Dead remake, which are like 2 of the scariest movies to come out in the last like. And I am like to this day, I'm like I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That Evil
Uh,
Dead remake was I hold it as the scariest movie I've ever seen.
it's
I hold it
terrifying.
above Hereditary and all that.
I was like, look, I think I was at the time I was just kind of like, oh, these reviewers said it's close to Evil Dead 2, and that's or like the old ones, and that's really like you could handle it, not knowing
Yeah.
her as well as I do 10 years later. Um, so she's like, no, I looked down the whole time. I'm like, oh, you would have just left and go to the next theater. Um, yeah, it's funny though because it will. Actually, I'm terrible at segues, but it's good. So movies I think she can handle is something like Jack Brooks, Monster Slayer, which is a really good beer movie. Like I watched it last night, and I feel like I bought the Blu-ray just
Hmm.
because I was like, actually, I was hoping there would be some special features on the Blu-ray and anything. No, it just starts. I get it. They didn't have probably budget to put it on Blu-ray, so there's no menu, no nothing. It's just the movie,
Oh, that's awesome.
no subtitles. um.
That
So
just
anyway,
fits. It fits perfectly with this style of movie too. That's what the Blu-ray is.
yeah, I was like, pause. Okay, okay. So, but yeah. Anyway, we could keep going on horror of what we've kind of grew up with and everything, but yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. That's my like white whale. I'm saving for when I'm like ready to talk about it because I do love Freddy Krueger and all of that. So one day.
Yeah.
But cool. So we're talking about Jack Brooks, Monster Slayer, and before I explain the really simple plot, but why this movie? I mean, full disclosure to people who are listening, Josh gave me like 4 or 5 really good picks, narrowed them down to 2, and not gonna lie, I was nervous about the one he didn't pick because it was Emily Rose, and like exorcism movies just it doesn't matter even how bad they are, hit a different chord where I was like, am I actually going to be like scared of this again as I was when I was in like middle school? So I didn't rewatch it. So thank you for not letting me.
I rewatched it so you don't have to. It's still scary. I
Yeah.
watched it while I was in a hotel room packing up gear after a shoot. And I kept finding myself just standing in the middle of the hotel room, like staring with my mouth open at the screen.
I think I rented it on like a sick day or something.
Yeah.
So I will rewatch it. And that's the joy of doing this stuff is you get to rewatch things. But I was like, okay, now I really have to not watch something at night because that would have screwed me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe if I was thinking in my head like, oh, maybe like I'll psych myself out and be like, no, it's Deb from Dexter. Like you can't be scared.
Well, the nice thing is that the majority of the movie takes place in a courtroom.
Yeah,
So
it's
you get these scary moments, but you get to like relax into a courtroom drama.
yeah. Maybe I'll pop it on after a recording. I'm not. All right.
All right, Jack
So
Brooks.
Jack Brooks, thank you. So why Jack Brooks? That was the question.
Yeah, when I was going down the list, I was like, what could I fill a lot of time talking about? And when I rewatched Emily Rose, I was like, I love this movie. It had an impact on me. I love the exorcism movies because they're movies that truly scare me.
Yes, same.
Whereas most times I'm like, oh, cool, I wonder how they made this, blah 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 blah. But I just get lost in those types of movies. So it has all of that, but Jack Brooks has so many layers to it, and it is such a surprising movie. So the way I came across Jack Brooks Monster Slayer is through my TikTok. People suggest things all the time, and earlier on, when I didn't have 200,000 people, um, and it was more like maybe toward like 25,000 or so,
Mhm.
someone suggested this movie, and I was at the time where I was trying to put in a spreadsheet every single movie that every person suggested, and then it just got to be too much to track.
Too
But
much. Yeah.
this was one of them, and I looked it up, and I saw the movie poster, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun, or it's going to be completely terrible. But people identify me as like the horror guy. And the
Sure.
reality is that I'm just someone who likes horror. I can't hold, I was
That's how
talking
I
about my,
identify myself as well.
yeah, I identify my TikTok not as like the horror aficionado. I identify my TikTok as Josh has a good time. And that's
Yes,
what
I
you
love
show
that.
up. So,
Can
and
I?
talking about my memory, I don't like, I don't have the knowledge to like some of these other people, these other horror content creators who can just like rattle off all these facts about actors and directors. And I
Mhm.
don't have that. I just have a good time. And that's why I picked this movie. What were you going to say?
No, I was. So you mentioned the poster, and So it's so funny you mentioned the poster. And maybe we could just side by side here or whatever when we're editing this. And I feel bad because this movie's so much better than what I'm going to say. Is it's the same poster as that Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas poster. like same like kind of art style. Like they're both holding, like he's holding a wrench, and like I googled them side by side last night. And I was like, do you bring this up? And I wasn't going to because who wants to talk about Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas? But I've
Well,
never
I was
seen it. But
thinking
I know the
that,
poster.
or like the original Star Wars poster, or Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I
So
feel
much
like has a
cooler.
similar.
So much cooler. So much cooler. No, it was more of the goofiness of it. So, um, simple plot. I just pulled what I think it's either Wikipedia or IMDb says. The film is about a plumber named Jack whose family gets slaughtered by a demonic beast while fixing the pipes of Dr. Crowley, played by Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself. The professor awakens an evil spirit and eventually transforms his whole body into a monster. With evil spreading out of control, Jack harnesses his anger to face the monsters and avenge his family. And this is where I'm going to say to anyone that's listening, and also Josh, we will be bringing spoilers just because I will,
Yeah.
just because we're jumping around, we're talking about the movie. So just full, but that is the main plot of uh, Jack Brooks' Monster Slayer, and it starts so funny too because like my first notes, like it's like Land of the Lost opening with these like this big monster that's like a jungle monster, and these indigenous people, and they're fighting the monster, and it's very like Land of the Lost. Or I also have some notes here, like its structure of a story has a big, and I mean this as a compliment, like Goosebumps Are You for the Dark
Hmm.
style to it. And I'm just a sucker for like YA horror.
Yeah.
So like I was brought in immediately because that's like the fun I liked. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a really fun watch. And it was like 9:30 at night too, so it got me up.
Yeah. It's immediately fun. It's immediately campy. The visual effects of the monster are like somewhere in between Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and like the original Evil Dead. It's like somewhere in there. It's like a little scary, a
Mhm.
little funny. Um,
It
yeah,
it's funny too. Is like it has two cold opens for the most part. Like you have that opening of the monster fight with the tribe, and then it cuts to Jack Brooks's origin story of watching his parents get slaughtered to under the sea.
yeah.
Um, and that's a funny scene. Like that. And this is a horror comedy that I don't think I mentioned. That's a funny scene too. Like because I'm like this, I instantly feel bad.
Yeah, and it's the perfect setup of like you don't realize what you're seeing until you get to the end of the movie. Spoiler. But
Yes.
we jump back to that at the end and find out that the guy in the shack in the mud hut who's gonna
Mhm.
save the indigenous people is Jack Brooks. And so what you're getting is the end of his story, the beginning of his story, and then we jump to how why it all matters. And we end up with this guy who's got anger issues because his parents were slaughtered in front of him and he lived and they didn't, and he's just has never been able to control his anger, and that has been the one thing that has been keeping his life from ever going anywhere. And so he ends up being a plumber, taking night school.
Yeah.
uh
Okay. You just answered like two of them. I'm like, all right. I think guess he's at night school. Because it's plumbing business. I'm like, what? I don't understand it, but okay. Like my dad does HVAC, so I have tons of. I always want to know what he thinks when he sees stuff on TV, like on TV, because I grew up him being like when like John McClane crawling through the air duct. Be like, well, this is a good movie, but like no one's ever gonna crawl through an air duct.
right, it's like
You're gonna
that
be
thin.
it's like that thing, and you'll cut your arms up because they're not cleaning inside. So I was wondering that about his plumbing too. Um, but yeah, and it's so funny too because they give him like the world's worst therapist.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I really immediately like though, they kept it in Canada, which was fun to see because a lot of these Canadian productions will like pretend to be like in America, and then you'll hear their heavy Canadian accent. Like go watch any of those Are You for the Darks or Goosebumps. They all actually share the same cast, and I actually looked through a lot of the actors just to see if they had been on them as kids, because you find that a lot with Canadian actors.
Uh-huh.
Or there's another show, that was a little old, a little like late 90s ish. This had the same vibes, like same kind of. There was an off-brand Buffy the Vampire Slayer show called Big Wolf on Campus on Fox Kids, Fox Family, and same vibe, but they pretend to be in America, like it's supposed to be like America. High school quarterback turns into a teen wolf, and the Canadian accent is just so heavy.
You almost don't notice, and then they're like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's what
And then
all
you're
the
like,
time.
oh, this must be Canadian.
Yeah, especially the girlfriend.
Yeah.
Oh, so so as Josh just mentioned, he has these anger issues, and then we get him in class, and the true performance of this movie is his teacher,
Yeah.
which is Robert Englund, and Robert Englund has become kind of like I feel like if you have a good horror movie and he has nothing to do, he'll show up and do a cameo, but like he stars in this movie.
He really does. He showed up. This is 2007, so it's way past Freddy Krueger. And he
Mhm.
shows up, and he doesn't have to do this, but he gives it 110%. He gives it 200%.
Yeah,
I mean,
his physicality is like that of Freddy, but I get to see Robert Englund do it instead of in makeup.
yeah, yeah, and there's like moments that feel kind of Home Alone, like when he first finds the crate and he's trying to open it up and he steps in the toolbox and his dog is, so he's got the physical comedy, but he's also can carry the idea of being possessed and not having control over his own body. He's also just endearing as a teacher who's like trying to help out Jack
Hmm.
and give him a little bit of like a nudge of like, hey, let's build some confidence with you. It's a
So
very in-depth character.
so he because he right before this popped up and everyone popped up in Leslie Verne, Behind the Mask.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he popped up in that, but so did the other guys that popped in a lot of movies like Kane Hodder and this and that. And I don't think Tony Todd popped up in Behind the Mask. Anyway, but then he actually is in the other movie that I DM'd you about, which I felt so awkward doing, but I was listening to your podcast, which is in 2015, and it's Funhouse Massacre. Anyone's listening to that, you gotta watch it. It's the same vibe. It's a ton of fun, and I mean he's in the first act, the first scene, um, and he shows up, but nothing like this. So one day after class, he's like, hey, Jack, are you you're a plumber, right? Like, come to the house. So Jack comes to the house, and I mean, this is just why I thought Jack was a terrible plumber, because he like just kind of doesn't do any expecting, and there's this it's immediately this oldest like boiler or whatever he's working off of, and the thing just short circuits, and it causes that ancient spirit to kind of rise up, and
Hmm.
Jack's like, I'll be back. I broke apart. I'll be back tomorrow. And over the night, the transformation happens, or it begins to happen.
Yeah, the uh, dry ice fog comes out from
Yeah.
the ground and into Robert Englund, and his eyes turn black, and he discovers the chest in the yard. And meanwhile, Jack is just like frustrated, pissed off. He goes to buy this part. There's some old guy there who won't stop talking. He's just like, "Shut up, give me the part," you know.
And the old guy is God, I forget the name, like what they call it in movies, but he's like the Doomsday voice too, out of nowhere. And it was so great because it's all this like, this is hammy, all of a sudden, like, don't go back there. You don't know what you're messing with. And he's like, I don't care. That's what I liked about Jack too. He was kind of like, all right, give me the part. Like, hey, this is silly.
Yeah, yeah, he's too caught up in his own story to care about anything else.
Hmm.
Even helping his teacher it's a nice gesture. He doesn't have to do it, but he's like, well, yeah, I am a plumber. He's just so grumpy and frustrated with his life. So he goes to that old doomsday guy twice because he's like, oh, it's a really rare part. You got to come back at night when no one else is around and come get this part. And then he tells this like, really drawn out story about origin of the crate that Robert Englund has found in his yard.
The heart.
Yeah, it's
And
an old Japanese relic of a black heart that still pumps.
I was so cool when he was eating the heart too, because it's like right out of God, I just watched them all. Like I think Jason Goes to Hell when the coroner gets the brain of Jason. It's the Robert Englund eating the heart. It's right out of that scene where he just looks at it and then eats it and swallows it. And I actually want to ask you, maybe a filmmaker, because one of the notes has had like 4 things on the IMDb trivia, and I know you take those with a grain of salt, but I always read them. Is there was no CGI or anything was like fixed with computer effects. So I was really wondering, because I thought one of the coolest effects was what Robert Englund did with his throat. It's like, was that him?
No, it's gotta be a prosthetic over top, and they're pushing something like between his actual throat and the fake throat. It's gotta be like extra skin or something.
It looks so like clean and good where I was like, okay, that's some body work.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that would hide it is maybe his beard was also fake, so that they were able to hide the seam of the fake neck underneath his beard. But his beard is also pretty thin and very
it's
tight.
like mine. Yeah. It's like nothing there. Speaking of beards, though, that was so I was like Jack Brooks, for a man that doesn't doesn't care about anything, he keeps himself really groomed. That was really like all the movie. It's very clean, very sharp, a little tan. So, and then kind of like for the next, I'd say 45 minutes of the movie, we kind of just get like, in the best way possible, the Robert Englund show, which is like him doing his best of like the Nutty Professor meets the movie Monkey Bone. Like, like this movie reminded me of so many different movies in the best way. Oh, the one thing you mentioned, the Doomsday Prepper, and the story told, and this is something like how cool, and I get budget, and probably it would have been really cool to see that flashback as like an animated version like they did in Krampus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just to remind it had the same structure.
Yeah, and what they ended up doing was kind of that like misty Vaseline on the lens flashback that you get on like the History Channel or like in a Disney movie or Christmas movie or something, which also has its charm to it.
Yeah. No, I fully like. I'm glad I own this. I know we're not towards the end, and this isn't a review show, but I'm glad I now own this movie. Like, it's gonna be a fun throw on. Just like, hey guys, have you seen this? No, you haven't. Like, we could all handle it.
Yeah, or even just to put on in the background while, like the other night I watched Phantasm for the first time, but it was while we were playing Cards Against Humanity with my cousins, and so it was this great like, because that movie doesn't hold up as a like sit and focus your whole attention on it.
I watched it last year, and it couldn't catch me.
But it has enough weirdness and enough fun that glancing over your shoulder, you can catch the entire plot. You can see all the crazy weird stuff and stop the game for a second to be like, oh my God, I can't believe they. So same thing, it can, but this one I think can actually hold up as like, everybody sit down and watch this movie.
It's really fun. Yeah. All right. I have a note here, just I'm going through, the dog, Robert Englund does have a dog the whole time, and the dog is just adorable, and like, I don't know, brings a really fun part to it, and him and the dog play together so well.
Yeah, there's a moment where Jack is in the basement trying to fix his water or whatever, and he calls up, and there's just this really organic moment. Again, this is just, I think, Robert Englund giving 200% to this role, even though he didn't have to, where he's like just sitting on the stairs playing with a dog toy and his dog, and he gets up in a way that someone who knows that dog and has played this game a million times does. It just felt so natural, and it's such a small detail, but those small details are what elevate this movie, I think, beyond just a Sunday afternoon, oh, it's on TV, interesting, I wonder what this called, because when I saw it, I put it on with that expectation of like, oh, let me just throw this on in the background, and ended up being like, whoa, this movie deserves a lot more respect than that.
And I think it deserves to be on those lists that like top 10 underrated like horror comedies right there with Tucker and Dale and Behind the Mask. Um, but um, what what's fun about it? What's back to it is um, did you? I'm all over the place. Maybe I might cut this. I don't know. We might leave it in. Who knows? It's um. But what's did you recognize anyone in this movie at all? There's one person I recognize immediately. It's
Um,
not a famous person. That's obviously not Robert England. It's one actress. Uh, dude. Okay.
no,
The
no.
girl.
I mean, I didn't know that Robert England was in it until I saw him, and I was like,
Okay,
"Who
that's
is
a
that?
fun
I know
surprise.
who that is." Yeah,
Yeah. No. So the girl, the nerdy girl who answers the question, like or answers every question.
yeah, yeah.
She's the girl in Mean Girls. That's like, um, it's like Regina George punched me in the face. I recognized her immediately.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
You
awesome.
know, like she's in that little like clip. Yeah, that's her.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I looked at her IMDb because of course, like, and that was her first role too, the Mean Girls. So I was like, that's fun. I just the first person. I'm like, they all like I told you, all those Canadian actors, they pop up in their own.
Yeah.
um. So Robert Englund comes back to class. I feel like personally, like I lost a bit of track of Jack Brooks for the little of the movie because I was so into Robert Englund like showing up.
Yeah.
And he shows up and like he's clearly just like I don't get why these kids are hanging around. Because he shows up, he pukes. There's so much puke effect in this movie, and he's like, "Yeah, okay." The next up mumbles something, and then they leave because he comes to class twice
Yeah.
in
Hey,
between his transformation.
yeah, I keep forgetting, like, there's something there's something about it where when we're in the classroom, I assumed everyone was in high school, but then Jack Brooks is obviously an adult who has a job and like has been doing it for a long time. So I don't know what the night school was or if like everyone in the class was younger and he's like, going to school much later, if he's getting his, high school diploma as a 35-year-old
Maybe,
old or something.
yeah. Cause in college, like I took when I went back home from college, I would take some like summer classes, like night school, and it's a mix of
Yeah.
ages.
But there
But
is there
obviously,
is like when you're in school, like Jack obviously is his own story, but when you're in school as a student, there is this like this pressure of, like if they were all adults, if they were all Jack's age, it'd probably be like, fuck this, I'm not sticking
but
around,
but
but
the one girl says though, so they're in college. I'm standing with the college because the one girl says, "Well, I'm only here for the credit."
yeah, okay, yeah.
So they're in night school. That's where I took her. Some sort of it's a night class, and it's probably community
Community
college
college,
of.
yeah.
Um, so anyway, they're in there. And you kind of mentioned already, we have that flashback, which takes up a good chunk of that movie, while cutting back to like Robert Englund's transformation. Um, kind of goes through class, uh, and then I keep saying like people know, no, they're listening for hopefully for to learn. But he transforms and things start going right, and he throws one of the students that tries to help, and then they run, and Jack Brooks actually has his turn like in the last 15 minutes. Like his movie is last 15 minutes.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
this puppet that is this beautiful creation of like the Freddy like New Nightmare slug like head like sluggish from New Nightmare combined with
Like
like a
Job of the
child.
Hut.
Yeah, the Job of the Hut and like a child, like remind me a lot of like the Coyote Brothers of like Ernest Scared Stupid or like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And like, so he's there and he has these tentacles and people are wrapped in them, and he's just turning them into zombies. I mean, or that's what we'll call them, like monsters. He's turning them into monsters.
Yeah. Because they're kind of like zombie meets like vampire a little bit. They got
Yeah.
these sharp teeth and this big black hair. It's very reminiscent of like what's the dead guy from Hocus Pocus? Uh,
Oh,
is it
I
Billy?
was gonna say Brooks, Bone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking. We're Doug Jones, the Doug Jones character in Hocus
Yeah.
Pocus.
It's that kind of physicality that you would see in like Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Hmm.
or and that's that level of makeup where it's like it really stands out as like big foreheads and big nostrils and sharp teeth and big poofy black wigs.
But it looks so good, and I mean, even the makeup's there, and then even just the effects, you can tell. Like, I chuckled to myself about it because like the one like they're just wrapping. You can tell that the actors are just wrapping the tubes around them because
Yeah.
it's
Oh
this Jabba.
no.
Yeah, it's this Jabba the Hutt squid monster version, and so Jack Brooks just kind of him and his. I mean, I don't think he should have saved his girlfriend, not girlfriend. They just wrote her to be like the worst human ever.
Because
She.
that's what he thinks he deserves. I'm gonna bring this all together at the end, but
Yeah.
yeah, let's keep going.
Um. Oh yeah, please. At any point, if you want to. uh. So he rescues her, and I think they lose the other girl in the or someone else in the chase down. But then he stops his van. He's like, I got to go back, and he just leaves her in the middle of the street. And he goes back, and he takes his pipe and a wrench and his tool belt, and he just fights and face smashes these monsters. I mean, there were such good face smashing effects in this. Of just like, let's fill it with the jelly and the goo, and we have the puppet, and we're just gonna smash it now.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like I think the climax, and then the ending. What I found funny is right back to comparing it to a Goosebumps or an Area for the Dark is we use the science project that Robert Englund was talking about with the chemical to defeat him.
Mhm.
My one question is I figured they weren't zombies because he gets bit in the arm and doesn't turn.
Yeah, no, you have to be turned by the tentacle, I think is the rule in this movie.
Okay.
And it's not that they're still attached to him by the tentacle because they break off when they become the monster and everything, but it's something about the beating heart, and I think the tentacle connecting to them and
Mm,
maybe the blood from the heart like pumping into their blood, and then that's how they become, but I think it has to be that exact connection. I don't think they can turn each other. I think they're just
gotcha.
out to kill.
So I just blew past it. So what were like the layers and stuff that I just blew that you found it in? Because you even said like, because I'm just please feel free
I
and
think
bring
I
up.
think there's quite a few things here that have made this stand out as a movie that is like now it's definitely in my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time, I think. And one is that it's made in the early 2000s, but it is a love letter to the 90s as practical effects are dying. It's saying like, please, like, look at what you can do, and you can't do this with digital. Um, it had the nostalgia of the movies that I loved growing up and the TV shows that I loved growing up that you just don't really get much of anymore. It was my biggest complaint about *Malignant* was I thought that if they had just done it with practical effects and changed nothing else, that the movie would have been phenomenal. Instead of this like confusing, like some
Did
people love it, some people hate it.
did we just become best friends? Because I thought the same thing about *Malignant*. I was like, there was something off about it. For that reason, it was a little too shiny for like being like, well, no, it's bad on purpose. And I'm like, okay, but
We
like,
know how to do this. We know how to
yeah,
do this. We know how to do
I
bad.
could. Hell, I rather actually. I just got her schedule on the show because I went to high school. I went to high school with her. Um, I rather watch Velocipaster. Uh, like that bad. It's the lead actress in it. I know, and I don't know what she's gonna pick, but anyway, like I rather watch something like that. Like I know what I'm in for. Those filmmakers meant to do that and did it well, and it's so dumb. Or like I have a group of friends. We get together every Wednesday, and today's Wednesday, but not today, and watch So Bad It's Good movies like that, and like just
Yeah.
become a pro at picking them out well. So when you just brought up Malignant, I thought the same thing. It just needed a little difference, and then I'm back on loving it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially in the age where like J.J. Abrams is bringing back practical Star Wars effects and merging it with CGI
It
in a
should
really
be.
smart way. But that stuff
Yes.
aside,
Yeah.
this movie hit for that reason in particular, but also because it very clearly was telling a story about mental health and about toxic masculinity and about just how like growing up as a guy and dealing with trauma in a way that I haven't seen other movies do. And they took this incredibly sensitive guy who's completely boarded up all of his walls in order to protect himself from the entire world. He's paired himself with a really shitty girlfriend. He's like trying to better himself because when you're in the throes of depression, and you're really deep in the shit, like you want to get better, but you just can't. And so he's going to therapy, but he's paired up with this like really shitty therapist who just wants
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with him and can't handle the fact that this guy's hurting and needs to like find himself again. And he's just latched on to his childhood trauma, and it has created such barriers that he can't become the person he wants to be, even going to community college or whatever it is, trying to better himself. And it's only when he starts to like have confidence in himself and look inward and be like, I have the tools, literally with a tool
Yeah. No,
belt. I mean,
like there's a little metaphor there of
I've got this lead
fixing
pipe and
pipes.
this wrench, and like I know how to be angry, and that's what people need right now is for someone to be really fucking angry and smash in the faces of all the bad things. And he does that, and he becomes like the savior of the world. He's I think the ending where he's with these indigenous people and he's in the hut like wrapping up his hand for the 10th
Mhm.
time in the movie. It's because he is now traveling the world ridding it from monsters. He
Yeah.
becomes in those final moments at the very very end of the film Jack Brooks monster slayer. And there is like I learned in my writing class that the characters in your movie or in your stories have existed long before you wrote your story and will exist unless you kill them long after. And his existence long after is as a superhero.
Yeah. I immediately. I can't. I see it. You've mentioned it. I'm so happy you pulled all that out of that movie, just because it is definitely a right, like a critique on toxic masculinity and like owning yourself and just being comfortable with what tools you have and are good at instead of just bumming through life as he did and running from your emotions.
Yeah, and realizing that, like, I mean, I'm maybe pulling too much from this, but I did watch it during the
No.
pandemic in the throes of depression. But
Who did?
he has to look inward and like and see that the like what he has to give the world is enough. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
like
No, I
if all
agree.
he has to give is anger, there's a way to use that in a really smart way to create solutions to things. So like if like for example I'm sitting at home and I'm angry because I can't be around my friends and I can't do this and I can't do that. I picked up some hobbies and I started making people macrame wall hangings of all things. It gave me like somewhere to put that frustration,
I
and it
started.
like it
Oh, sorry.
ripped up my fingers, and it was really frustrating, and I would want to give up halfway through, and I just like poured my frustration into it and created these like pretty things that like
That's
people now
awesome.
have in their houses.
I
And I
started.
probably will never do it again.
I started doing like Bob Ross oil paintings just because it was like
Oh
I need to
hell
do
yeah.
something, and I had never done an oil painting, but I was like, it can't be that hard.
Yeah, and look at that,
And
man. You gave yourself
yeah,
something to do. You made something. You probably had a good laugh.
oh, it was great. I got really into classic hip hop, and I cut them together as videos. I would film myself doing the time lapse, and so I understand with your macrame, you got to get into something, and no, I just love that you pulled that out of this movie, and um and this ending with he has the indigenous people, and he just like well, he looks different, right? He's like walking out like a Jason Momoa
Mhm.
Aquaman character, and I actually think the funny enough, I think he plays the what's his name? Trevor
Yeah.
Matthews plays the like Swamp Thing also that they're fighting against.
Yeah, I saw that. And then the special effects guy, I think, plays his like
Mhm.
foot or something like that.
Yeah. So um there's one bit of research I did do because I was really interested. So the doctor's name is I meant to mention this earlier, that is Dr. Crowley. And it made me go, why is so many I don't know if you know, and I learned this last night, why are so many things in like literature or movies or Crowley, like Mr. Crowley from
Oh
Ozzy
yeah.
or Victor Crowley. I'm sure there's some others. So I just Googled it real quick. I think Led Zeppelin has a couple mentions of Crowley. It's an occultist. It was like like
Oh.
early 1900s occultist that was into like ceremonial like magic and founded this religion called Thelema. Just claimed he was a prophet and just was just that. And I was like so curious to why do we see that name pop up everywhere? It sounds
Yeah,
cool.
well that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I never made that connection. I get these like feelings when I hear a name like that, and I'm like, do I know this person? Or like, do I know this character? And then I brush it away. It's smart to look
Yeah.
it up.
So anyway, that
Oh
was
no,
the
I gotta
last
write
thing I
that
kind of
character now. I gotta use that name sometime.
yeah, it's I was like, hey, I didn't read the whole Wikipedia because there's a lot. I'm like, all right, I get it. He was a guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, dude, this is a really fun pick. Like, I'm really glad you introduced me to this movie, and like we could just kind of like spread the word of Jack Brooks because. Like the first thing I did after finishing watching the movie is, of course, I Googled like Jack Brooks sequel, like whatever happened to that. And I know the director and even Trevor Matthews, they've made their own movies since then, both with directing and whatnot. Um, None have gotten the kind of critical reception that Jack Brooks did. But last I saw was like 2015. Someone wrote about it, and like apparently John Knotts, the director, says like, "Oh no, like there will be a sequel one day." So like I don't know, maybe in like 15 years we have like an old Jack Brooks Monster Slayer sequel.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I would watch any version as well. Cause like in my head, I'm like, well, if they can't get the same cast together, I would totally watch Keanu Reeves play the next iteration of
He'd
this.
be fun, like
Yeah.
old man Jack Brooks.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
even a comic book, just like the Adventures of Jack Brooks Monster Slayer. Uh, yeah, it's funny. It sucks. Not funny. It sucks because a lot of these movies that of this ilk have these wants to be sequels. Like I shared and I donated very minimal money to the Leslie Vernon Behind the Mask like Kickstarter to get that sequel off the ground.
Yeah, that's
And that
such a
has a
bummer.
fan
That
base.
character that should have 10 movies. That is
Yeah.
such a fun character.
And so any really other I feel like we really did dive into this movie nicely, and any really other things you want to add to what, because like I said, I'm really happy and surprised you like with what you were able to pull from this movie that's not talked about or mentioned, or like this as like someone who was going to do this talk and interview was the funnest and hardest to pull from because there's not much on it. So like we're kind of now like maybe one of the top videos when someone looks up Jack Brooks Monster Slayer.
Yeah, that
It's
would be cool.
us in the Indonesian subtitled version that they put on you that someone ripped and put on YouTube.
Yeah,
Like
I guess I would just say like this is I love movies like this because there's so much heart and soul into how they were made, and you see it in every frame of the movie. It's rare, I think, that we get horror movies nowadays that are original stories that aren't sequels to something or aren't spin-offs of something, or aren't based on a book, just something truly, truly original. And this is a smaller scale than, like, the new Candyman movie as far as budget, but
Hmm.
it has just as much bang for its buck. Like,
Yeah.
it has every single frame of the movie is interesting, and I want to know. I don't know how else to find movies like this other than talking to each other, and I
Hmm.
feel really grateful that we have social media and TikTok and Instagram so that we can do that. So I would just encourage everybody, check this movie out. If you have movies that it like rings a bell in your head and you're like, yo, you've never seen this, please send it my way because I want to watch
Same.
it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, and the heart and soul, and yeah, just when things are done like that, and I reiterate, like, it reminded me so much of Are You for the Darker Goosebumps, but those good episodes, and I still watch them to this day, have those same beats where, like, someone making that episode that week decided to actually try to make the best version they could of it.
Yeah.
And that's what Jack Brooks feels to me. That you beautifully put, Josh. So, where can the people find you if they want to follow you, share your things? I just where's
Yeah.
yours?
I put most of my energy into Haunting Season podcast and Haunting Season on TikTok. And the podcast you can find all over the place. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast. There's a couple other ones. But if you find my TikTok, I've got some version of a link tree, and it shows like all the shows I've been on.
Mhm.
I'll add this one
Oh, I
when the
appreciate it.
episode comes out. Yeah, because I like being able to click on it and being like, look at all these friends I made. So yeah, Haunting Season, just like Hunting Season, but for ghosts.
Perfect. My not just my self-defined dyslexia, which I don't have, but I kept saying haunting session for the longest time because I was scrolling too quick. So find haunting season on TikTok or your podcast network. You'll be able to find it. It's really fun. I really enjoy it. I become a fan. And you can find us here at Flyover State of Fear or Flyover State of Film, whatever you choose. You can follow me at Twitter on Shindango1 and our new Twitter at Flyover Fear. And just stay frightful, everyone.
Welcome to Flyover State of Fear.